Would you say that another difference between Catholicism and Christianity is that most Catholics don't read the Bible and most Christians do? Because I just say that as a former Catholic, I was totally stunned when I finally read the Bible and learned that Jesus had brothers and sisters.
Well, I think that is true to a degree. I think it's a little less true now because since the 1970s, Catholics have been a little more nudged towards reading the Bible, of course reading their Bible. But yeah, for centuries in fact, the Catholics were forbidden from reading the Bible. They would only get whatever Bible they were given by their priests from the pulpit on Sunday morning. So yeah, that is a huge difference, is that most Protestant and other type groups are Bible-based. The Catholic Church is much more based in this magisterial authority of the Pope and the councils of the Church.
Okay, thank you. You say in Lucifer Dethroned that the Catholic Church was the repository of the Patrine allegedly from St. Peter's current of magical energy. What does that mean? Because as a former Catholic, as far as I know, most Catholics probably think that they're not involved in magic at all.
Well, first of all, that's what I was told. That's not saying it's necessarily true. But yeah, we were taught that there are 12 currents of magic flowing from each one of the 12 apostles. And that, that Peter was possessed of the Petrine current. So what was involved basically is that he, you say most Catholics don't think they're involved in magic. Well, they believe that a glass of wine turns into blood. Poof, isn't that magic? They believe in bleeding statues and crying statues and, levitating saints and all sorts of bizarre stuff. And it's interesting. I don't know if you know this, but the famous words of magic, hocus pocus, do you know where those come from?
No.
Well, they're a parody of the words that the Catholic priest says over the host when he poof turns it into the body. You say, in the old Latin, you say, hoc est inem corpus meum, for this is my body. And hocus pocus is like a parody on that term.
Wow. Well, who told you that story about the magical currents?
That was told me by the gentleman that consecrated me a bishop.
Okay, thank you. You also say in your book that the Freemasons were the custodians of the Johannine magical energy from St. John current. Do you really think that St. John or St. Peter gave magical powers to anyone?
No, I don't now. I did then, but that obviously is not true.
Right, thanks. In your own experience, are there any links between the occult and Catholicism?
Well, I think we've already touched on that, but yeah, over the centuries, in fact, the Vatican has the largest collection of occult books in the world.
Really?
They have some occult books that are nowhere else. And, of course, they won't let anybody read them except their own scholars. But, and yeah, down through the centuries, like, for example, most Catholics have heard of Thomas Aquinas. Well, his teacher, Albertus Magnus, Albert the Great, was a very high-level occultist and alchemist. And many popes practiced magic. In fact, there's actually a grimoire, a magical workbook that's called the Grimoire of Pope Honorius. So there's always been this blending of Catholicism with magic down to the centuries. And many times the Mass, I mean, the Mass itself is a magical act. It's what's called in magic a thaumaturgical act, because you are turning one substance into another. I mean, if I were to go down the street and say, well, I'm going to turn this milkshake into the body of George Washington, that would be a magical act, you know. But yet, because it's done in the context of the Catholic Church, nobody thinks it's magic. But sure. It actually is.
Sure. How do you know that the books in the Vatican, they have occult books there?
Well, I was even told that in college by my own Catholic theology professors.
Thanks.
You know, I've never been there myself, to be sure, but I mean, I have no reason to doubt that.
Okay. Who suggested to you that you should become a Catholic priest in order to become a satanic priest?
Actually, nobody.
Oh, I thought I read that in your book.
No, I was already involved in becoming a Catholic priest when I found out by happy coincidence that it was necessary for me to be a satanic priest, a Catholic priest, in order to be a satanic priest.
Oh, okay. Well, who told you that?
Well, that was told me by the guy who was my higher up in Satanism, who was called, his magical name was Arius, and which is one of the names of one of the dukes of hell. So this was told me by several different sources that, in fact, if you look at the history of black magic and of Satanism, you'll find it inextricably bound up with the Catholic priesthood, because the famous, it's called le messe noire, the black mass. You have to have a priest to do that. And that's the core liturgy of Satanism, is to do the black mass.
And why did someone suggest it would help to be a Catholic priest, to become a satanic priest?
Well, because, see, this is very strange, but one of the things that some Satanist groups do, some don't, is they believe that the host, the communion wafer, is really Jesus, just like Catholics do. So that's one belief system that Catholics and a lot of Satanists have in common. And the funny thing is that they will take that host and abuse it, they'll urinate on it, they'll stamp on it, they'll do other disgusting things they won't even mention, and in doing that they think they're hurting Jesus. They believe they're abusing Jesus. And in some cases, like kind of a low-budget satanic outfit might go and break into a Catholic church. Why do you think there are locks on the tabernacle in a Catholic church? Because in the Middle Ages, people would steal communion hosts and abuse them for Satanism. But it's obviously a lot less dangerous and a lot easier if you have a Catholic priest on staff, so to speak, who can officiate at the Mass, le messe noire, the black Mass, or the Mass of Saint Seek-Care, which is even more vile, and pull down Jesus out of heaven, put him in the cookie, and then you can stamp on him, defecate on him, whatever you want.
Wow. So from your own experience, how many Catholic priests would you say are satanic priests? Or what percentage? Well,
that would be hard to say. I only knew like 4 or 5. But, I mean, especially in the wake of this pedophile scandal and everything that happened down in the last couple of years in the Catholic Church, I think there's probably, it's probably a fairly small percentage, maybe 1 in 10, but that's a totally ballpark figure. There's no way to know that.
Okay, thanks.
Of course, the problem is that in a sense, all Catholic priests are satanic priests because they're serving a false God and a false Jesus and a false gospel.
How are they serving a false God when they believe there is only one God?
Well, that may be true. You got me there. I misspoke. But in every other respect, I mean, they're servants because, see, any religion that draws people away from the true gospel of grace is satanic. And Catholicism does that. So in a very real sense, Catholicism is satanic, even though they've gotten one thing right. Like I said earlier, even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Right. Okay, can you expand upon the sentence where you said you met a man who said you had to become a Catholic priest before you could become a Luciferian priest?
Well, see, in the occult degree system in which I was operating, all of these different degrees go up what's called the tree of life. And that's an unfortunate association, but it's the way it is. And what happens is that you have, like, 6th degree is the Catholic priesthood. Then 7th degree is the Luciferian priesthood. 8th degree is the Catholic episcopacy, the bishopric, and so on. So that's what was meant by that.
Wow, that's a very close connection then.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What comment have you got to say from your own experience about doing the rosary, since you described a man who was very dangerous and he said the rosary?
Well, you're talking about the guy who was a very high-level voodoo hierophant and also a Gnostic Catholic bishop. And he said the rosary all the time. And I did too. I mean, here, I was a Satanist. I was rattling off the rosary all the time. The problem is it's a kind of mood-altering, conscious-altering thing, just like a mantra, because you're over and over again, you're saying, Hail Mary, full of grace, blah, 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 you know, and you say it so rapidly, and whatever, then they give you something to meditate on. They have what are called the mysteries of the rosary. So, for example, you might meditate on the first joyful mystery of the rosary, which is the Annunciation, which is when Gabriel came and told Mary that, you know, she was going to have the Savior. So it's a kind of meditation. And I think, you know, to that extent, you're mumbling off vain repetitions, you know, as Yeshua warns us, we're not supposed to make vain repetitions. There are people that say rosary after rosary after rosary after rosary. And I mean, it's just not, because your heart really isn't in it. I mean, they actually in our parish, they actually had a rosary saying contest to see who would say the fastest rosary. So, you know, that's kind of on the same level of, like, you go to Tibet and they have these prayer wheels where you just spin this big wheel, and it is, as fast as the wheel spins, it's saying a prayer, you know. I mean, it's pagan superstition. It's nothing out of the Bible.
I see. You say in Lucifer Dethroned that in order to become a Catholic bishop, you had to swear allegiance to the Pope of Voodoo instead of to the Catholic Pope. What does that mean?
Well, it happens that the fellow that consecrated me a bishop was a Gnostic archbishop who was in obedience to the Pope of Voodoo down in Haiti, who at that time was Hector Francois Germain. And basically there's a very strong correlation between Voodoo and Catholicism. I mean, basically, you've probably heard the statement that in Haiti everything is 90% Catholic and 100% Voodoo. Mm-hmm. And all the Catholic saints are basically involved in Voodoo. And in most third world or developing countries, you will find a profound mixture of Catholicism with local, what is called cultural spiritism. Let me give you an example. A friend of mine was in the Philippines, which is heavily Catholic, during Holy Week. You don't want to be in the Philippines during Holy Week. It's a nut house. The streets are packed with all these bizarre people nailing each other crosses and flagellating themselves, and he said it was the most horrifying thing he'd ever seen, because it'd be all these Catholic churches up and down the street, and the priests were out in front sitting on a little lawn chair selling shrunken heads for the festival, literally shrunken heads. Ooh. And there'd be throngs and throngs of people. And they'd have he said it was really grotesque. They had this giant dead Jesus laying down a bier, you know, like a statue or a paper mache float kind of thing almost, with real human hair attached to it. And the hair was long, it would like fall down almost to the ground, and they had like about 8 guys carrying this, you know, as a processional. And these throngs of people would come up to it, and they'd touch the hair, and then they'd kiss it, and then they'd like go off into some trance. And it was so crowded that the person would fall, it was kind of like a mosh pit. You know, the person would fall down and be carried on the top of the crowd, back off, and then they'd fall to the ground and lay there and foam at the mouth. And then the next person would come up and touch the hair, and, you know, he'd do his, I mean, it was, you know, very, very bizarre. And you see the same thing in Haiti. And that's because, see, Catholicism is just thinly veiled paganism. And when you have these kind of festivals like this, the varnish cracks, and you see what's really behind the mask, which is flat-out paganism.
Wow, thank you. Have you got some other stories of hypocrisy within different religions from your own experience?
Do you have all night?
Yeah, right, I was thinking maybe one good story.
Well,
or a couple.
let me address something that I wanted from before about the other thing you asked. The problem is that Catholicism has always been willing to compromise. It's always been willing to go into the country, and it sort of invades and sort of take over the pagan stuff that was in that country. That's why you have all these weird patron saints and these weird practices in various Catholic countries. And it's a syncretism, which is not biblical.
What does syncretism mean?
Syncretism means taking a little bit from here, a little bit from there, a little bit from here, and a little bit from there. And when you see 20th century 21st century Catholicism, you're seeing a crazy quilt faith. And you've got to realize, I'm sure a lot of people that have seen this video are Americans, and Catholic or otherwise. And that's not the Catholic Church I just described is not the Catholic Church they see in the street corners of Chicago or St. Louis or New York. The Catholic Church in this country, because it's in the minority, has to behave itself. But the Catholic Church in Latin America, in the Philippines, in other countries where it is dominant, where it is the power, is a ravening tiger. And all this pagan stuff just comes out in a way that you never see here in America. Because here in America, the Catholic Church has to put on its best face. And even then, we have hundreds of priests sexually molesting babies and children.
Yes.
So, as far as hypocrisy, I mean, I don't know where exactly you're going with that question, because obviously every church, every religion has its share of hypocrites, has its share of people that talk the talk but don't walk the walk. And I mean, you can talk about TV evangelists. You could talk about, even the Mormon Church claiming that it has no paid clergy. And yet the combined tax returns of the first presidency of the Mormon Church back in the early 80s was like over $100 million. You can talk about, people that are building lavish crystal cathedrals while people are laying in the gutter starving to death. I mean, there's all kinds of that. And I think that whatever faith it might be, it's a reproach to Yeshua, it's a reproach to Yahweh, because they all had a heart for the poor and the downtrodden and the destitute. And unfortunately, I mean, there's many good Christian institutions that are taking care of these people, that have rescue missions in their cities, and it's wonderful. But for every one of them, there's also some clod that's running around in, $5,000 suits and $2,000 Rolex watches and whatever, and driving around in a Mercedes-Benz and saying, "Oh, I'm a humble preacher of the gospel." It's an abomination. And those people are going to be judged.
I agree. I imagine that many people hear about you getting on to all this satanic stuff, think you had a bad heart. Did you?
Well, I was a sinner. I had it in a sense that, everybody who's not saved has a bad heart. I had an unclean spirit. But I think if you taught not just people, not just my wife, but other people who knew me back then, they would say I was basically a pretty nice guy. I was always, both of us, my wife and I, were always trying to help people. We were always trying to bring healing into their lives, and we thought these various things, whether it was the occult, or even, it sounds bizarre, but even Luciferianism or Satanism, we thought we could do these things, because a lot of people don't realize in the Satanic Bible there is a ritual of compassion, which is used to pray for healing for someone that you love.
Okay, thank you. You wrote that you offered a Catholic Mass for a sign of whether or not Jesus and Lucifer were on the same side. Mm-hmm. What happened then?
Well, that was one of the stranger things in my early career. I had this strange, blinding revelation in my mind that I felt I had a supernatural insight that Yeshua and Lucifer were actually the same being, which is obviously totally insane if you know the Bible. And because it was so mind-staggeringly insane, I thought, well, I'm going to do what a good Catholic priest would do. I'm going to say a Mass of the Holy Spirit, which is a special kind of Mass that you say when you're trying to seek divine guidance. And my wife was there, and a young man who I was training for the diaconate was there as an altar server. And I'm doing the Mass in my own little I had a private chapel in our apartment. And when I came to the part where you say the words of institution over the wine, where you're supposed to be able to turn the wine into the blood of Jesus, as I was saying them, it started to fizz and bubble. And by the time I was done, it had turned into real blood. Now, I wasn't sure what was going on at this point, and I kind of freaked a little bit. And I took one of the altar linens and just very gently dipped it into this chalice of wine, and it came out looking like a blood stain. It did not look like a wine stain, because usually wine stains are more purpley colored and blood stains are more reddish brownish colored. And I tried sipping it, and it was blood. And I had both my wife and this other fellow come up and look, and it was blood. So I didn't really know what to do, but I figured, well, this is the sign. Now it was interesting because my bishop worked as a chemist by day. And so what I did is I took this piece of altar linen that had the blood stain on it, so I thought, and I cut it off. And I put it in an envelope and sent it to him to have him analyze it, like you'd have a blood test done. You know what he told me? He said that it was human blood, but of a type utterly unknown. Never been seen before. So I thought, wow, this is it. And of course, Yeshua warns us that a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after signs. So, I was a fool.
What did you think it was a sign saying?
I thought it was a sign saying that, yes, my insight was correct, that I could follow Lucifer and Jesus at the same time.
Okay, and in retrospect, what was the truth of all that?
Well, of course, I think the whole Mass is a satanic sacrament to begin with, but I think that was a miracle, one of over a dozen or more that Satan did, because, the Bible makes it clear he can do lying signs and wonders so as to even deceive the elect. And I think it was a miracle that Satan caused to happen to deceive me and my wife and followers.
Okay. So is there a difference then between asking for a sign and noticing when signs show up in your life?
I think, there is, because on the one hand, people are always seeking after a sign, asking for a sign. They can be very easily deceived. And the Catholic Church itself is a testimony to that, because there's all these weird things. I mean, you read about people who make a tortilla, and they say, oh, there's the face of Jesus in the tortilla. And so people come from thousands of miles to worship the tortilla. Or they say there's a stain on the wall of a church, and it looks like the face of the Virgin Mary, or whatever. All that stuff. It's total rank, superstitious nonsense. And what the Bible says, like in Mark 16, it says that they preached the word with Yahweh confirming the word with signs following. What that means is that true Christian believers are supposed to have signs and wonders following them. They're not supposed to be following the signs and wonders. So that's the big difference, yes.
Would you care to comment on the recent funeral of Pope John Paul II?
Well, I was totally blown away by a couple of things in it. The most astounding thing to me was that when they brought out his coffin, and I didn't actually watch the funeral, somebody emailed me a picture from it, and the coffin is shaped like a trapezoid.
Wow.
Which is weird, because, who's ever seen a coffin shaped like a trapezoid? You either have the old-fashioned, hexagonal-shaped coffins, or else you have the regular caskets. And as we've already discussed, the trapezoid, the order of the trapezoid is the inner order, not the innermost order, but the inner order of the Church of Satan. So why on earth would the Pope, who's supposedly the vicar of Christ, why would he be buried in a trapezoidal-shaped coffin? And my answer to that is that basically, again, that's old Splitfoot, the devil, putting his little signature on one of his greatest creations, because John Paul II was a masterpiece of satanic delusion. And the devil had to sign his work.
And what makes you say that?
Well, because he was very much like what I think the Antichrist will be. He was a man of great presence. He was a man of great charisma. He appeared to be a very nice, loving, a man of peace, quote unquote. and yet he was none of those things, really. I mean, he was the head of a church which has killed 90 million people. He was the head of a church that has presided over the sexual torture of thousands and thousands of women and children. He was basically, probably, for sure he was a Freemason, and we have very reliable reports that he was also a Satanist, that he presided over the Black Mass, and you know, I don't know these things for sure, but I know again that by their fruits shall you know them. And the fruits of the Catholic Church all over the world are torture and poverty and ignorance and murder.
That's true.
You know, because if you look at any country that's heavily Catholic, high rates of poverty, high rates of illiteracy, high rates of corruption. Look at Mexico, look at Latin America, look at the Philippines. You look at any country where the Bible, where a Bible-based religion has held some sort of sway, like for example in the United States, we have a higher rate of literacy, we don't have that much poverty, you know, because, again, by the fruit shall you know them.
Okay, and the problem is lots of people look at all those poor countries and think that it's Christianity doing that, not Catholicism, and they don't see the difference.
Yeah, and that's a big problem, because most people, like over and over again, I just kept wanting to put my foot through the television. They're the leader of the Christian world is dead, you know, blah, blah, blah. The Christian world mourns, you know, the death. Well, I wasn't mourning his death, except possibly the fact that I probably figured he's on his way to hell faster than greased lightning. But, you know, I mean, I don't know. It's just a very sad situation, because the media has been so buffaloed by this. Even to the point, I was talking with a friend about how if you happen to watch horror movies, every horror movie, they always have a Catholic priest or a Catholic nun opposing the devil. You know, sometimes not very effectively, but you never see it being a Bible-believing Christian opposing the devil. No. It's always a nun, it's always somebody in a black Halloween costume opposing the work of the devil. And it's nonsense.
Thank you. Who is Lucifer?
Well, Lucifer is not a fallen angel, but a fallen cherub. Because it says in the book of Ezekiel that he is the anointed cherub that used to cover the throne of God. Now, most people, when they think of a cherub, they think of some cute little naked baby who, you know, fires arrows at people on Valentine's Day. I don't know where that got started, but actually, if you read the book of Ezekiel and other books of the Bible, cherubs were mighty, powerful, awesome-looking beings. And the real appearance of a cherub is a giant, blazing with glory, winged bull, twice the size of a real bull. So that's what Lucifer really looks like. That's why there's all of this folklore about him having horns and a cloven hoof and a tail, is because actually he did. Now what happened with Lucifer, see, his real name in Hebrew was Halel. That's the actual name of Lucifer. And it means bright and shining one. And he was the brightest and the most glorious of all of Yahweh's angels. He was over the throne of Yahweh. The other four cherubim were on all four sides of the throne, and he was on top. And he was lifted up by pride and fell and became, and this is described in both Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, he fell and became Ha-Satan in Hebrew, Satan, the adversary of all mankind.
Okay, thank you. And what's Luciferianism?
Well, Luciferianism is sort of white light Satanism. It's kind of Satanism light. And basically it teaches that Lucifer is this great light bearer who gives us the light of wisdom and the light of initiation, and that he's been slandered by the Jews and the Christians over the centuries. And they claim that Satan and Lucifer are two different beings altogether. And so Luciferians are people who believe in the unadulterated light of Luciferian wisdom, but they basically are still trying to be nice people, unlike Satanists who aren't trying to be nice people. And they basically believe in cultivating and acquiring the Luciferian initiation, which they believe brings them enlightenment.
Why did you become a Luciferian?
Well, it was a natural progression. I mean, several of the people I was involved with, both my spirit guides and my human teachers, were leading me along that way. I got involved with Aleister Crowley, who was one of the leading Luciferians of the last century. And also, some of my mentors said, well, you really need to experience the Luciferian initiation. And of course, the only way to get that was to be a Luciferian.
What did you do to become a Luciferian?
Well, you basically swear allegiance to Lucifer, and at that point, you know, it's not quite like the same thing as what I did later on. See, again, this is a gradual progression. Later on, I actually sold my soul to Satan, but in this case, I just swore my allegiance to Lucifer.
How many years were you a Luciferian?
Well, not very long, really, because it didn't take me very long to graduate from Luciferianism to Satanism. So I would probably say at most 6 months to a year.
Okay, thanks. And what does the title of your book, Lucifer Dethroned, mean?
Well, it basically means that as a lost individual, I had Lucifer running my life. When I realized it or not, when I was a witch, when I was a Catholic, when I was a Mason, Lucifer was in charge. Lucifer was enthroned right here in my heart. And when I got born again, Yeshua HaMoshiach, Jesus Christ, kicked him off the throne, and so he was Lucifer dethroned. And plus I knew the title would really tick him off.
In your book, Lucifer Dethroned, you say something about believing that the devil being Christ. Would you explain that?
Well, that's sort of the same thing as what we were talking about a few minutes ago concerning that Mass with the blood-filled chalice and all that. But, yeah, I came... You see, there's this confusing thing. And in the Bible, Lucifer is, in some translations, called in Isaiah 14, the bright and morning star, which isn't really what the translation means. It means shining one. Then you go to the book of Revelations, and Jesus is called the bright and morning star. Now, if Lucifer is the bright and morning star, and Jesus is the bright and morning star, if you're not really well versed in the Bible, you might come to think, well, you know, if A equals B and C equals B, then maybe A equals C, you know. So that was partly how I came to the blinding realization that Jesus and Lucifer were the same being.
So you came to that realization yourself?
Yes.
No one told you that?
No.
Okay. So,
well, probably somebody did, but it was a disembodied somebody.
Right. Is there such a thing as a Luciferian priest?
Yeah, sure.
And did you ever become one?
Well, in the sense that I was a priest who was a Luciferian, yes. But actually, the trouble is, see, all Satanists are Luciferians, but all Luciferians aren't Satanists.
Oh, I'm confused. Would you say that again?
Okay, I hope I can say it again. All Satanists are Luciferians, but all Luciferians aren't Satanists. So when most people use the word Satanist and Luciferian in almost a synonymous way, and there's only a little bit of difference between them. But what I mean by that statement is that all Satanists also believe there is a light side to Lucifer. They look at Lucifer and Satan as kind of like yin and yang, you know, the dark and the light, the positive and negative terminal that makes the universe work. And they call the false god Adonai, which is of course not a particularly good name for Yahweh, the true God of the Bible. So yes, I was a satanic priest who was also a Luciferian priest.
Okay. Now, Lucifer was the most beautiful of the angels, and a lot of people think of beauty and goodness, of beauty and light as synonymous with goodness. So what do you have to say about that? Well,
first of all, appearances can be deceiving. That's why Yeshua himself warned us to beware of wolves that are in sheep's clothing. Now, what is that? A wolf who wears sheep's clothing is trying to look beautiful. He's trying to look like a cute little cuddly, warm, fuzzy sheep that you want to hold in your hand and pet and all of that. And yet it's a ravening wolf. And so right there we have this idea that appearances, whether they're physical appearances or doctrinal appearances, can be very deceiving, because all the different cults, for the most part, that are out there appear to be good Christian churches. They appeared. The Catholic Church puts on that face. The Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Way International, all these people appear to be good. And even on an individual basis, there's this popular belief, if you're wicked, if you're evil, then you'll have this kind of, snarly, snaggletooth looking face. But unfortunately, one of the evilest women I ever met was also drop dead gorgeous. And and she was so evil, I won't even tell you that she was a vampire of the worst sort. And she was so attractive, she could just suck you into her web just like that.
Wow.
And you'd be dead by morning.
Was she blonde?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just worried.
Nothing ends
blue eyes? No,
I'm
just,
Actually, she had blue eyes.
Right.
Yes. So, that's
the typical Hollywood goddess.
Yeah, we look at, we have this image in our minds because babies are born with blue eyes. We have this image that blue eyes are innocent. Blonde hair is innocent. Because a lot of babies are born with blonde hair. And so there's this almost imprinted in our archetype of our race that beautiful, childlike looking women, and even to a degree men, are very sweet and very innocent and very harmless. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're not.
So how can people tell the difference?
Well, again, like Yeshua said, by their fruits shall you know them. If a person comes along, as I quoted earlier on in these DVDs, if they say something that is contrary to the law or to the testimony of Yeshua, as it says in Isaiah 8, verse 20, then there's no light in them. Or if they're doing evil things, like if somebody says, I'm this great mighty man of God, and yet they're out there jumping into bed with 18-year-old cheerleaders, and they're married to someone else, you can probably figure they're really not a great man of God. And I think the best way is to watch the person, is to see, because usually it's very hard to pretend to be a Christian, because the authentic agape love of Yeshua does not come out of you. It's forced. It's kind of like you get this, I'm this sweet, nice, gentle Christian, and you just got to love me, like that. And it's so fake, And the other thing is if you are a true Christian yourself, you have the Holy Spirit within you, and then your spirit will witness to the spirit that's in the other person. That's called the discerning of spirits, whether or not that person is a genuine Christian. Now, I've met many people who were either well-known Christian leaders or just plain old ordinary Christians, and when I came into their presence, I could tell this person is a false brother or a false sister.
And how can you tell? Is it a look in the eye, a feeling in your
a
heart?
A feeling, all of those things, but especially sometimes in the eyes, sometimes even, oddly enough, even the nose.
Really?
I can smell brimstone.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, because I think discernment is a key word for the coming times.
Oh,
because
yes.
the Antichrist, a lot of people think he's going to be very nasty, and they don't realize he's going to be wonderful.
He's going to make John Paul II look like Saddam Hussein. He's going to be so nice and so charismatic and so handsome, and he's probably already walking the earth today.
Wow. Do you have any warnings to make to people who get the idea that Christ told me to do it, or God told me to do it?
Well, it depends.
When it was a bad thing.
Right. Well, again, the same verse, to the law and to the testimony. If what the person is being told to do does not conform, like if you say, God told me to rob a bank. Well, obviously we know right in the Ten Commandments it says, thou shalt not steal. Or I've actually had people tell me, God told me to go out and cheat on my wife, because it says, thou shalt not commit adultery. What part of that sentence don't you understand? So, again, when a person says God, now obviously it's not always that clear. Sometimes people will say, God told me to marry this person. And they're both single, so there's no clear-cut thing. But you need to, what I tell people is when you think that Yahweh is speaking to you, and I believe he does that, it says that, we are his sheep and we hear his voice, then you need to pray and ask Yahweh God to stop all lying and deceitful spirits from speaking to you. and asked that the Spirit of truth, the Spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind would fill your heart, your soul, your mind. And then if that impulse, that impression is still there, then it's probably either your own mind or else it's from Yahweh. It's not a demon.
Very good, thank you. You were taught that Lucifer was the father or the elder brother of Jesus. Who taught you that and why?
Well, those are two different teachings. The Mormons teach, the Mormons teach that Jesus is the elder brother of Lucifer. But in Satanism, I was taught that the father of Jesus was Satan.
Wow. And they all believe that?
No, they all don't believe that. Okay. Some people believe, like for example, if you read the Satanic Bible, you'll read a line which is extremely hateful, but it says, "Behold the crucifix. What does it symbolize? Pallid incompetence hanging on a tree." Some Satanists just despise Jesus and everything he stands for. Other Satanists believe that Jesus was actually a great Satanist, and that his father Lucifer slew him on the cross to free the world from the dread chains of Jehovah. So there's all kinds of twists and turns and spins to this evil theology. Okay. And just like, you got to understand, just like unfortunately most religions have this, and Christianity is especially notorious, just like there's many denominations in Christianity, there's many denominations in Satanism.
Wow, so what is a Satanist?
Well, a Satanist is a Luciferian with the gloves off. A Satanist is someone who basically, it depends, you got to qualify this, because if you're a member of like the Church of Satan or some of these other legally incorporated satanic churches, you believe in radical selfishness, kind of like an Ayn Rand objectivist type of philosophy where everything you do is for you. You are the center of the universe. And so if you want a woman, you take that woman. If you want something, you take it. It's just, take, gimme, gimme, gimme. And most Satanists believe in a literal devil. They believe he is like kind of a Miltonian anti-hero who's the ultimate symbol of rebellion. And so they believe that he is someday going to defeat Yahweh God and pull the Almighty out of heaven and resume the throne he once had up there. Because the book of Isaiah does say that the devil used to have a throne. He used to be enthroned over this planet by Yahweh, but he rebelled. So anyway, the Satanists basically believe in selfishness. They believe in fact, if you even like the nicest Satanists would probably be like the Church of Satan type Satanists. That sounds funny, and even they believe like, you should just kill useless eaters. If you're elderly or if you're ill or like, someone like this Terry Shine, well, just kill them, that they have no right to live. Like I saw the right-hand man of Zena LaVey, whose name is Nicholas Schreck on Sally Jesse Raphael many years ago, say that he'd just go into the nursing homes in this country and just shoot them all right in the head,
And did you believe things like that when you joined the Church of Satan?
No, I didn't. I was nicer.
Okay, thank you.
I had a nice upbringing. I don't think Nicholas Schreck had a very nice upbringing.